Hello and welcome back. Today we're going to do a recap of the finals, which was a 2-session game for the 3v3v3. For those of you who don't know, the 3v3v3 format I think is kind of the best format to kind of do some sort of competitive multiplayer Victoria 3, with one of the main central ideas being the idea of tripedal balance. When one team gets too far ahead, the two other teams will come and they'll clap the leading team, so you'll get a lot of 6v3 situations, which makes it so interesting and helps to balance what is a not very balanced game at game start, although there are some balances that are asymmetric. For example, France has the strongest military at the start of the game, but Great Qing has the most growth potential. So we're going to get into it, and we're going to start with the draft, as well as a little bit on the setup. Going into the game, there was the league finals type of situation where the players were playing to some extent for league points. So let's jump into that here. These were the final league point scores, but we had the top 3 players all kind of playing for first. As we entered these format, these are the finalized scores, with Paul getting first place, TS getting second, and Joey getting third place. First place, of course, wins the very prestigious prize of the opportunity to buy themselves candy bars. So there was that. Coming kind of back into the game, that we have with the updated scores, this is what they were playing for, and we had 3 teams. On team 1, we had Joey, who was in third place going into the game. We also had a 1, and later Java played also on that team, and we had Dara Blue. On the second team, we had Paul, who started in the first seed. We had, who was playing EIC? Lakagagar was, oh no wait, Lakagagar was not on that team. EIC was being played by Engin, and then Tired Star was playing Russia, and then we had on the third team, we had TS Emporium, who has since changed his name on the Discord, I think, and then we had Lakagagar playing the UK, and who was playing the USA? I believe Tim was playing the USA. So that's kind of the players on the teams. And so, jumping into this game, there was a lot of rumblings in regards to the draft about who was really strong. Some people were really bullish on Prussia because of your ability to form the German Empire, which of course is very strong and represents a lot of GDP growth. That's how the game is scored. In the bottom left here, where it says LP, that's how many league points that were earned for the second session, and total is how many league points were earned for the game. And the scoring is based on GDP growth. Nominal GDP growth multiplied by percentage GDP growth, because some countries like Qing will have really high nominal growth, and some countries like Prussia will have really high percentage growth. And when you combine the two, you add it makes it a little bit more smooth, the sort of scoring system, where some countries aren't just absolutely insane. So coming into the draft here, I kind of have my power rankings, which some people have disagreed with, and we'll just pull these up right here. But this is my power rankings going into the game. We're going to have to move that over. Oh, no, we don't. So these were my power rankings going into the game for the draft, where I have kind of 2 things that to talk about, or to take home, which is both how good the country is. This is the power rank, and also the draft range I think is appropriate. This is really important because I think that while Qing is the #1 country because they have great, enormous growth potential, I don't think they're draftable in a first pick situation. But just kind of quickly running through it, Qing really has enormous potential to grow because you have basically unlimited pops and a huge income from minting and this sort of thing, and so you can really crank up construction or much of anything. France has an incredible military at game start and has the best tech, or is tied for the best tech. Russia has enormous potential, particularly they have a lot of states with really good bonuses in logging. They have some of the best resources, and they have an enormous pop at the start of the game. The United Kingdom has a lot of growth potential from having a bunch of subjects, although they are vulnerable because it's very easy to land their coast, because all the players abuse triple landings in this game. It's like fully high-powered. We also have East India Company, which has a lot of China advantages, but has better tech with railroads, and I believe they start with line infantry. USA starts with skirmish infantry and has a lot of growth potential, but they do suffer from convoys problems because they generally tend to be away from the action, and so they have to build up on convoys and ammo to support their conscription rates. Austria, notably, is kind of powerful from their ability to, make things happen in regards to the German and Italian unifications, but okay. And then Prussia, as we mentioned earlier, a lot of their power, they were deemed pretty spooky kind of going in, where it was seen that you had to somehow kneecap or stop them from forming Germany, because they've consistently done well when they formed Germany. So this is kind of the situation going into the draft, and let's kind of just do a rundown of the draft itself. So, Team 1 rolled first pick, and they picked up France, which is kind of standard fare. We've seen France first picked a lot. It really pairs really well with anything because you get a really strong military and you can make stuff work later. So if you get France-Prussia, it's really easy to unify, generally speaking. And if you get something like France-Qing, you can try and protect Qing with your really strong military, something to this effect. Team 2 notably picks up Prussia, which is a very early draft, in my opinion, for Prussia. They picked up Russia in their first pick. I just have it out of order. They picked up Russia, which is kind of, again, we've seen a lot of France first, Russia second. Russia has huge growth potential, especially with the way that you can force a market liberal at the very start of the game. And then Team 3 picks up UK, USA, which seems like a fair enough thing, although I probably would have preferred to see UK East India Company, but because I'm pretty bullish on the East India Company. I'm also pretty bullish on Qing relative to a lot of the stronger players, but okay. So they get UK, USA. Team 1 picks up Austria to go along with Spain, and then Team 2 now has 2 picks, and they pick up the East India Company, and they pick up Prussia, which is definitely very sensible, leaving, of the top 8, kind of just quickly jumping into the browser, the top 8 really, in my mind, stand out from the other countries, and then there's the sort of 9th pick, which is a bit of a wild card pick. We've seen a ton of different picks. We've seen Spain, we've seen Ottomans, we've seen Sardinia, Piedmont, we've seen Egypt, we've seen Brazil, had not seen Japan going into this game, and so they kind of leave Qing on the table. And now it goes to Team 3, and they have what I think is a bit of an interesting decision, but TS likes to cook up, or I don't think it's an interesting decision. I think it's just Qing that they have to pick here. But TS likes to cook stuff up in the lab, which I can respect because I'm kind of similar. And they pick up Japan with an interesting strategy, kind of going into the game. And so Japan, notably, of the unrecognized countries, is one of the more powerful ones. And so they also start off with like 11 million GDP. And so with Japan, the idea is we are going to have a high growth percentage. And so, okay. Then we have Team 1 picks up Spain, which I think Spain's a very reasonable 9th pick, but I don't think you're supposed to leave Great Qing on the table, but the players do. And so we have our teams here, and now it's time to get into it. The first session was a little while ago, but to the best of my recollection, the game kind of opens up with everyone taking pieces of Great Qing, and this is kind of, I think, the strongest strategy because you're trying to grow your GDP, and when you take a look, you have enormous potential to just snipe stuff off and take GDP this way. And so, this is like, where's the GDP? See, 10 million in Jiangxi. This is a really easy way to grow your GDP by just taking Chinese provinces because they're worth so much, and we see a bunch of people come in and start taking Chinese provinces. However, they don't manage to hold on to them. But this is the exact opener we see. We also see USA, is going to go after Mexico pretty shortly on this sort of thing, and then later throughout the game go through for South America, which we've seen a lot of this sort of sphere of influence going for South America, which I think is fine enough. And we see the interesting part of kind of the early game, or the opener for a lot of these countries, and that is with Japan. What happened was Japan is Team 3, full annexes Japan, with UK, I think the UK, it might have been with USA, I can't remember which exactly, but the idea is they are going to full annex Japan and then release Japan, and so Japan will have all of the techs and institutions of either the UK or the USA. They've managed to full annex, and then they release, and then they have a problem. The problem is the turmoil, and they had a strategy for, resetting the turmoil by having a civil war. Unfortunately, Tired Star, the infamous pie thumber in Russia, sides against them on the revolution, and they switch sides, and then Tired Star switch sides, and once you switch sides once, you cannot switch back, which this was news to me, and he managed to effectively brick their revolution, which was a huge feature of, the first session, because normally what we've done in the past is when you get your revolution bricked, you just lose the entire country. I didn't want to do this, especially because it happened so early into the session when it was going to be a 2-game session. And so we had a little bit of a compromise and a discussion with chat as to what the punishment should be. And so the punishment was Japan can continue playing as Japan, but they would receive a 35% penalty to their score for this particular session as a penalty. And so they get to keep their country, but now they have a depressed score on top of they didn't get to reset the turmoil in any place, I think, except for Tohoku, which was the plan, was to be able to reset the turmoil. And this turmoil, of course, has pretty nasty state construction efficiency modifiers. I believe it's being negatively modified by, several levels of law enforcement, which he had to bring up in order to try and deal with this in Japan. Although he does very good at the end of the second session, does TS. And so that's kind of what happens here at the very start. But throughout this entire first session, teams 1 and 3 are doing pretty well, teams 2 and 1 kind of have a sort of tacit alliance. We see the North German Fed form. We see Austria allow the German Empire to form, doesn't look to fight it, this sort of thing. What we instead see is Team 3 goes up really high infamy. In particular, they do it on the UK in this first session. And we end up seeing a 6v3 on the UK to cut down to size, which is why we have Gumball Australia and Gumball Canada. If you get enforced on a cut down to size within 10 years of game start, you release all of your subjects at game start. And so this was an enormous, cutting down of the UK. Notably, the EIC was already released from the very start of the game, because there is a house rule: if 2 different teams draft the EIC in the UK, you have to release them. But there was a pretty good strategy on the part of Team 2, which is that EIC joins Russia's market before unpause by becoming a Russian protectorate. This prevents the event that gives them a ton of turmoil, and notably, there's a lot of synergy here because in the current patch of the game, EIC's weakness is kind of really not having a lot of iron and not having a lot of resources, and so while they have a ton of pops, they are not as resource dense, and this is kind of their disadvantage. This, of course, is Russia's advantage, and so Russia gets to specialize resources, and EIC gets to go manufacturing. They also managed to get Xing into their market, which is tremendous, because it allows you to specialize better, by having a bunch of buy orders from these guys. Okay, so UK gets cut down to size. They have to release a whole bunch of Xing provinces, because this is how they accrued a lot of the infamy. They also accrued a lot of infamy, I think, with the Japan play start. There was a slightly better way to do it, where you could have US full annex by doing 3 wars all simultaneously, where I think the US has to declare war on Japan, or no, wait, the US declares war on Mexico, and then you have Japan declare war on the US takes half the provinces in that war, and then you have the UK cut down to size US, and Japan join, and the US declare for the rest of the Japanese provinces in that same war, if that makes sense. And so then you get the US, before they enforce anything, they capitulate specifically to the war goal, or they trade the war goals of some of the Japanese provinces for being cut down to size, and they enforce that before they take Mexico, and so they get to have 0 infamy, take Mexico, and full annex Japan, which they then release, because you can cut down to size the USA pretty easily. They only lose Sequoia, but you cannot cut down to size the UK. Otherwise, you lose all this, which this is the UK's huge advantage. You get buy orders from your subjects, and your subjects pay you money that you can dedicate to construction. So we see this as kind of the turning of the wheel here, and we also see Mega Germany form. And going into the end of the second session, if you take a look at the total, you will see that Team 2 had 12.33 points at the very end, and that's taking into account the 4.8 points they get at the end of the second session. So in the first session, it just looks like they're running away with it. They have like something like 7 points. They look very, very, very strong, and this is kind of the state of affairs. Going into the session. This is kind of somewhere towards the end of the second session where this game file is right now. It's not at the very end because I forgot to save it, but this is as close to the very end as we get. Okay. Russia also managed to take, some Manchuria, just kind of looking into what each of the players were doing. France was going after Algeria and looking to eco up. This was being played by Joey, who overall did an amazing job, but he didn't really do much expansion. He might even have, does he even have infamy? Yeah, he's at 0 infamy, which is underutilization, in my opinion. Austria, towards the end, did have 2 Sicilies as a subject. They did have this. I'm not sure if they had too much other expansion. I don't remember about them taking Chinese provinces. Spain did a spectacular job expanding. They took Morocco. They also took, the very valuable land down here. I was pretty pleased with both Spain and USA's kind of expansion path. Spain also took some Chinese provinces as well, notably foregoing Beijing, which I'm not sure why there was going for Hebei over Beijing, but maybe Hebei was just worth more GDP, so 7 million versus 6 million, so perhaps this is the reason. This is a sensible reason, especially later towards the game when they ended up getting it. I think a lot of that was in Session 2, and this was also Session 2, but we also see them take Madagascar, annex Portugal. I think they subjugated Portugal in the first episode. They might have annexed them in the first episode as well. That's kind of Team 1's expansion overall. Prussia did the Germany thing and then just chilled. Notably, almost all their expansion was in Phase 1, and then they kind of just sat on 0 infamy for the rest of the game. EIC just annexed their interior states, which is a huge source of growth, one of the reasons why EIC is good, and Russia just mainly took this Manchuria bit, as well as, a little bit over here, went after Oman. Nothing too crazy. They did subjugate Persia, I think, and then were forced to give them up in a war. If I recall correctly, although we did see the very aggressive play Russia going for, trying to bricking the revolution of Japan, and then they also tried to brick the revolution of the British Republic later in the first session. And then the UK, they went for a lot, but then they got it cut down to size, but then they started kind of expanding it down here. And so that's kind of where the UK was doing. The USA, obviously, was around here, and then Japan made these moves, and notably this was the UK's before. Okay, into the second session, we do see a bit of an agreement between, so going into exiting the first session, teams 1 and 2 were kind of allies, which from a metagame perspective maybe didn't make the most sense because Team 2 had the number 1 player on it, and so Teams 3 and 1 both have a vested interest in kneecapping them. But did I say best player? The player with the most league points, who also was one of the best players, which was Paul. And so there's a thing going, and now going into the second session, they make a secret agreement between Team 1 and 3, where they are going to have a defensive pact. If Team 2 attacks them, then they will come to the aid of each other. Okay, so there's a defensive pact now in place, kind of going into the session, and there wasn't a whole bunch of war, but there was German Empire. The UK went over 100 infamy again, and Germany declares war on UK, which triggers the defensive pact. And so we see a 6v3 versus Team 2. And Team 2, this is after quite a bit of time of ecoing. And what Team 2 did is they kind of, with Germany, just built up an absolutely huge military. And, I think put too much of their income into military relative to, other countries which were able to expand construction more. And so if you're not going to use your military, paying for it doesn't really help the economy as much as construction would. And so this is kind of why I think Germany kind of fell off. They went from being the absolute spookiest country in the session 2, mainly because they had the biggest military, to not really do anything for the first half of session 2, they were spooky in session 1. The first half of session 2 don't really do much. Eventually declare war on the UK. This triggers the defensive pact between teams 1 and 3, and teams 1 and 3 managed to pull out that war. So, if I recall correctly, I think before that though. Oh, sorry. In session 1, Russia also won a 4v1 with a little bit of creative play and people getting forced on quite well in regards to being able to be ticked below 0 without really having anything on them because Russia didn't put war goals on them. I think that was in session 1. Was a bit interesting. In the first game, in the first session, Tired Star did get the Generalist point, which for this game did not actually give you a point, but okay. So that's kind of what happened here. And then we see an enormous amount of just ecoing up, especially by France. We get to see kind of a state of affairs where there's an enormous amount of tooling workshops here, and their resources are all here, and Joey here is making a really good use of edicts, to make sure that try and have as much of his manufacturing under an edict as possible, try and have as much of his resources under an edict as possible. I'm not sure if he did Lorraine. Yeah, so Lorraine, I think, is, if I recall correctly, is kind of one of the better places, but he's just like, near full ecoing, but still building up a decent sized military for Germany. And so the UK manages to protect their structural integrity, if I recall correctly, and then we have now kind of this new situation where Team 1 is now starting to run away with the game. And they continue to, at like 30 minutes before the end of the session, Tired Star has to leave. And I ended up taking over for Russia, which is, it is what it is. It's like for the last 30 minutes of the game because we couldn't find a substitute. And so then I was lost in the sauce. And what ends up happening is that Teams 2 and Teams 3 decide to team up against Team 1 with the idea of releasing Brittany and releasing Occitania, which would release Rhone. If we take a look at, the GDP heat map, I believe this province as well is part of Occitania, so if Rhone has to be released, Auvergne, whatever it's called, has to be released, and Brittany has to be released, this would kneecap absolutely the GDP of France, which was very much the idea behind being able to propel the other teams forward in terms of points. No one was going to take Brittany for themselves. They were just going to release it. Same with Occitania, this sort of thing. And so this is the war that had gotten started right before the end of the session. Game crashes 5 minutes before the end of the session, and we don't get to finish the war. Had the war happened, it would have changed who won. But as it was, we did see Team 1 definitively win Session 2, but also win the overall 2-session game, having a total of points amount of 13.3, or 13.4, rounding up. We saw second place for Teams 2, which was Prussia, EIC, and Russia, getting 12.3 points over the course of 2 sessions, and third place for UK, USA, Japan, which notably did extremely well in the second session overall in their growth, but it was not enough to make up for what was a very rough start initially, and the turmoil was a very significant problem for being able to construct, because you don't start off with this minus 75. You don't start off with this level 5 law enforcement. You gotta get that. And so that's kind of the state of affairs. Taking a look jump into the browser here, we can take a look at the scores as distributed by country. And so we see France. Yeah, let's actually, is there a good way to do this? One moment. Okay, so we saw France get an enormous GDP growth percentage of 933% over this session. Which was, here, let's just get that mouse out of there, which was very much off the back of, they were like the strongest ecoing up. They had about 2K construction at the end, but they did have to pause. Russia at the very end had about 1,800 construction, which was in second place, which was a combination, which was mostly Tired Star. Going into taking over for Tired Star, I think he had 1,400 construction, so he was firmly second place in construction, and then there was like, someone had like 600 or 700 construction, I think. I can't remember who it was. Let's actually see. Well, this is before. I want to see how much construction Japan has. Notably, this was not at the very end of the session. I don't actually have that file, but I just wanted to see how much construction. So that's a reasonable, pretty strong amount of construction. He probably had close to 700 by game's end, something like this. Really, really fast come up from Japan at the very end. But we see France, 933% GDP growth and a nominal growth of 236, which is far and away the largest nominal growth for the entire thing. So Joey on France got the generalist point. Joey, of course, notably loves interventionism, which I don't like. But there was a phenomenon I was noticing here, which was, this is not an argument that's been made about intervention. So what he does is he subsidizes everything and he exports the resources and the tools so that he gets to loop this stuff and build it up tall, and other people don't because their economies are depressed, and it's hard to compete when someone is subsidizing and exporting. This will not be the case in 1.5 because local prices will make it efficient to build these things yourself. But something that I think is notable, hopefully we can find something that I can use as an example, is when you are on subsidies, you can create situations where you are making money and there is a subsidy going out. So this iron mine's probably making money and a subsidy is going out. And this is something I thought about in the session. When you are doing this, you are increasing the weekly balance, and you don't get the 25% juice from the industrialists. So you don't get to have job creators, and you don't get to, or sorry, not job creators. You get that juice, but you don't get the juice from laissez-faire. Okay, you don't get the 25% capitalist IPT contribution efficiency. However, and I don't think that this is the case, but it could be the case, just kind of talking about, if the amount of money you get to spin into your weekly balance is such that it increases the weekly balance by a lot, and this weekly balance is positively modified by the industrialists, 20% bonus, then in theory you could get more free money from interventionism. I don't think this is the case. I also have to take a look at it, but a big part of it is also you get to the government-run railways, so if your railways are profitable specifically, this feeds a lot more money into the economy because these are government dividends, if I recall how this works, and so they just generate revenue that goes straight into your coffers. However, very often the railways are not making money, so this is not necessarily that great. Anyways, bit of a digression. Not really trying to talk too much about the economics of the thing, but this is notably one of the things that Joey does. He loves interventionism, he loves subsidies, and he did really well. So we see him get the biggest growth by far, 933% as well. Austria did have a little bit of trouble because they lost Bohemia to Germany at the very start of session 2, as kind of the war had already started at the beginning of session 1, and they end up giving up Bohemia. Germany probably could have pressed for releasing Hungary at this point in time. And if they did, maybe the scores, Team 2 actually probably would have won, but they didn't, so keeping going. We have Spain, who I think did a pretty good job expanding, took a lot of, key or high-value territories. I just hate to see that often these two territories just don't get taken in these 3v3s, and I just don't understand why. Gold is so valuable. It's just like absolutely insane, but did a very good job and almost got 1000% growth over the course of 2 sessions with 995% growth. So, you know, kind of gets spit out with the GDP that's similar to Austria, even though he started with considerably less, like a third the GDP. Okay, that's Team 1. Team 2, we saw Tirestar do a very good job ramping up construction and building. He also did the trick where you can get a market liberal at the very beginning. You know, there's a ton of logging camps going on. The logging is just notably insane, and we had this whole situation with the EIC being in the same customs union, you know, allowing Russia to specialize, and allowing EIC to specialize, because EIC can, you know, specialize in clothing or whatever, these sorts of things if they want. Notably, they're going to have qualification problems. They end up, I think, building a decent amount of plantation stuff as well, which I think is a lot better in multiplayer, but a little bit of a digression. And we see, of course, Prussia is forming Germany. So Russia had a GDP growth of 550%, but they start with a much higher GDP. Prussia had a GDP growth of 825%. I think that Prussia could have done a lot better if they focused more on eco, but also talking to Paul throughout both the sessions. You know, once he kind of locked in first place, of course, with the prestigious prize of being having the chance to opportunity to buy yourself a candy bar, he was kind of content to just, you know, be a little bit more chill. He wasn't trying to ramp up the absolute highest score possible, and so this is fair as well. Once you have the opportunity to buy yourself a candy bar, it's not like you're going to get 2, so there's that. And EIC, we saw mainly annexing interior states, managed to have a growth of 373%. Notably, it is much harder on EIC to have really high percentage growth because they already start with really high nominal 51 million at the start. And so this can be a bit of a trick. UK had a GDP growth rate of 340%. They definitely lost. So the big advantage of the UK is you have all these subjects, they pay you money, you get to use it for construction, and they lost that as a result of being cut down to size within the first 10 years. So a little bit of Icarus action, flew too close to the sun, had this ginormous growth by taking Qing provinces and then had to return them. Notably, they did have Guangdong, but what was it? I can't remember which team had a war goal on this, and so they just passed it to their teammate Japan. So Japan declared war on them for Guangdong, and so they had got to break a war goal this way. USA did, you know, kind of the Monroe Doctrine type of thing and had a GDP growth of 776%, which is very respectable. Notably, a lot of this territory is also like got a lot of construction malices out here, I think on this patch, and so this is kind of one aspect of, well, they don't start with Mexican land, so it's maybe not so bad, and the US land is getting buffed or will be buffed. I don't think it's buffed. This game was played on 1.3.6, and so they still have these negative modifiers. USA will kind of be a little bit better in that regard for the ecoing up, but they still did a really good job expanding. You know, USA and Spain notably looked kind of the best as the expansion people. Kind of UK made a bit of a recovery going after some of this stuff. I think that they end up annexing this as well, and so, you know, very aggressive on the expansion, a little bit too aggressive because they got too much infamy, but okay. And then Japan did really well, despite having a really rough start, ended up having a total growth of 968%. This, of course, is very much the point of playing Japan, is it's kind of like you get to start with just 12 million GDP, but then, you know, part of this is because you start with, like, not very good PMs, but you have a ton of labor, and now you have European tech with this catch and release strategy. Of course, the catch and release strategy, if you're going to try and rev afterwards to reset the turmoil, does have a lot of vulnerabilities, which of course was kind of shown by the Russia player, Tired Star, when he kind of joins on the rev. We might have to update rules regarding revs and this type of thing to make it a little bit better. But this is kind of where everyone was in terms of growth and how the game went. Just to kind of quickly go over the players, Joey was playing France. Austria was being played by Iwan in the first section, Java in the second session. Spain was played by Dara Blue. Russia was played by Tired Star, with the exception of the last 30 minutes, in which it was played by me. Notably, the last part was where we are right now is before the very last part of the game. Prussia was played by Paul 34, who was the overall winner of the entire league. And then EIC was played by... Was EIC played by Tim? Oh, man. Now I'm mixing myself up. No, EIC was played by Engin, who did really, really well. He had the fewest games, I think, of any of the players in the finals. He did really well on an Ottomans game before, and then he got in here and played EIC, and had a pretty solid game, I think. Maybe slightly passive, but I think that this is kind of okay, because you don't want people taking, your provinces. How did the capital get moved back here? I guess they just moved it here? The AI? They did a trick that was pretty neat where Prussia took South Bengal, the capital got auto-moved to Delhi, and then they later returned it, so they got to have a more interior capital, which was a nice strategy. But okay. The UK was played by Laka Gagar, who also didn't have the most sessions, and I think did pretty well given the fact that he got cut down to size in the first session, which... I mean, the UK still has some advantages because they have relatively good land. This land will be even better in 1.5 because you have a lot of fairly rainbow states, but they have a lot of, resources in both terms of both iron and coal. But you see just like these three provinces, I think this one as well, very nice for building tall in several of their provinces. Up here, Highlands too. The main thing you're looking for is having, iron and coal. Notably a little bit low on the wood as far as UK goes, but overall the big advantage is you have subjects paying you money and then also taking buy orders into your market, and you can sap off pops from them, and none of this can happen if they get released. USA also did a pretty good job. Let's see, the USA was the USA Tim? The USA must have been Tim. If I'm not mistaken. Man, I hope I'm not mistaken. I think I've referred to it as Tim twice, but did overall a pretty good job. And then Japan was the third place player for the league overall, the second place player for the league overall, which was TS Emporium. Interesting strategy. Little bit aggressive to use this type of strategy kind of in the finals when you're going to play 2 games, but I definitely get it. You're trying to abuse the fact that you have more pops, and you're going to get some claims on Korea, so you're going to get cheaper war goals on Korea, this type of thing, and so Tyrestar definitely thumbed his pie a little bit, which was very entertaining to watch. He went for, I think, he went for one more rev interruption other than this, but this is kind of how the game turned out, and a little brief summary of the game. I think moving forward, I just want to kind of jump into the browser and talk about 1.5 a little bit, and the 3v3v3 format, because we're probably not going to have a full league for 1.4. As soon as 1.5 feels fairly stable, I think we're going to lean into that. We will have a game this Saturday if we can get enough people. If you're watching here, you can go onto the Discord. The link should be below, and comment a wizard is never late if you want to play. And so this will be good if you want to play. If you don't want to play, that would be a poor strategy, I suppose. But just jumping into it, I think that moving forward, we kind of just taking a quick look at just giving some preliminary thoughts on the power rankings here. I think that Navy is going to suddenly become important. And I think that this actually might help out China a lot. Because if we come back into the game, I believe, unless they add more Navy military techs, they all start with the same military for the Navy. And so, despite China being way behind on land tech, the fact that everyone will have the same Navy PMs until Ironclads means they can overbuild Navy and use that as kind of their weapon. And so jumping back into the thing, this is something that in 1.5 might really, really benefit China specifically. However, China will suffer a lot from local prices, especially because they will start out with 60% MAPI, and they will have to probably rush agrarianism or use the trick where you move your market capital to Formosa, delete the ports in order to force corn laws, although you have to build a lot in Formosa for this strategy to work. And so they also start with like 120 million less GDP, so it's kind of tough to say. I think China is probably going to move down 1 or 2 slots in the power rankings, but not really move too much in terms of the pick range. France, I think, will no longer be... They're going to be, I think, fighting the UK for first pick, assuming they fix the Navy, this type of thing is kind of where I think these two are going to be. Notably, France does not have necessarily the best mappy states. Or we're still in the thing. Here, let's jump back in to the scene. France does not have, they have some good rainbow states, like in Rhone, and also Alsace-Lorraine and Lorraine. They start with Alsace-Lorraine, but they're not quite as good, I think, as the UK's, and I think this will be something that's potentially the case. But the UK, if Navy becomes really important, they start off with the biggest Navy, and so similar to how France is right now, where they have the biggest army, and this gives them a huge advantage, if having the biggest Navy at GameStart gives you a huge advantage, they will have this on top of having all these subjects paying in them money that's not fully captured by their GDP at GameStart, which is like 36 million. Of course, it does go down if they have to release the EIC, but you do trade routes and it comes back up, and I don't think it's that big a deal, but some people are asking for a rule where they have a better starting GDP, or one that's more favorable if forced to release the EIC. Okay, so I think it's kind of be between these two guys, and also Russia benefits a lot because I think they have some of the best mappy states in the game. I think Perm is the best mappy state in the game, or the best place to build early with GameStart, because the construction malice and the infrastructure is removed in 1.2, so instead they just have 20% logging and 20% iron at the start of the game, which is insane. So, Russia's going to be able to crank up really fast. You can abuse the trick to get the market liberal at GameStart, which is going to, allow you to get onto laissez-faire, and so this is going to be, like, kind of a big deal. So jumping back into the browser, I actually don't really know who's best out of, like, France, UK, Russia, this type of thing. Also, the East India Company might also benefit from the fact that you can just build a lot of navy. They get a lot of money. Their problem is discrimination. Now, if you are willing to release all of your subjects, you can instead play as Bengal with zero, the discrimination, or very little discrimination. You will discriminate against the English pops, which is funny. And so, EIC, it's really hard to evaluate, but they don't really have very good mappy states. Their best is probably like something like North Bengal. They have a lot of states that have, a decent chunk of iron and a lot of logging, but I don't think they have a single state that has both iron and coal. And so they will lack this kind of industrial, I guess they have a couple, but they suffer from lack of these particular types of states, and in terms of ecoing up, and I'm not sure how significant that is, but this will definitely be a factor. USA, I think, is going to... I think that they have some really nice states for local prices, but I also think the fact that they're relatively isolated, don't have a large starting navy, is going to be more pronounced, and I think that they are going to be a pick that won't be able to influence stuff on the rest of the map very well, and I don't know if this makes them a horrible pick. I think they will also be hard to be influenced. They will be more of an island pick, and so I expect the US to drop down to, maybe be 7th or 8th place, and I expect Austria to be the same because they don't really have that many good states to build in early on. Bohemia is probably the best, and relative to other countries, I'm just not seeing it. Austria probably moves to being, last place of these top 8s, and Prussia probably goes up to 6th place, because Silesia is really good to build in early on, as is Westphalia, and so, the combination of having really good states plus your GDP growth potential, I'm expecting to see that kind of thing. As far as the 9th pick, which is kind of how I see it, although we didn't see a Xing draft in this game, which I think was a bit of a travesty. But as far as the 9th pick goes, I think Belgium is really greatly improved because they have Wallonia to build in, which notably will have Sulfur now. They don't have sulfur on this patch, which makes it significantly better to build in, and they can have almost all of their economy in a single state. I think Spain is improved as well because Navarra will have a modifier that gives them plus 20 iron here instead of this negative modifier. And so I think that these will kind of be cemented a little bit as the top 2, like, 9th place kind of countries, especially because if the Netherlands, Benelux or whatever formable comes about, and you can do a unification play for, like, big Netherlands as Belgium, I think this will really, really benefit Belgium a lot. And so it'll be interesting to see moving forward what 1.5 has to hold, but this was the finals. And just to kind of quickly go back and talk about league points, in terms of placement, I did get an update from people. This is the league, or like no one noticed any errors, and I certainly didn't in my own work. And so we have in first place, we have Paul 34, followed by TS, with 32 points. So Paul's out in front with about 10 points ahead. Pretty close between Joey and TS. Joey had a chance to catch him in this third game. We see Darablu in 4th place. I was really happy with Darablu's performance kind of in this last game. I think he's probably the most improved player. We have Tim coming in at 5th place. We have a tie between Tired Star and Engen here, although Engen has way fewer games, so it's a bit... Well, I also really am a fan of Tired Star's play. It's very entertaining to watch. I think he's probably too aggressive, but we see them tied for 6th place, 6/7th. I would probably have to give it to Engen, though, because he did it over the course of fewer games. And then we have Java in 8th place, Awam in 9th place, and Laka Gagar in 10th place here to kind of round things out for the top 10 players of this league for 1.3. So that's kind of it. This is the map at the end. Let's take a look at the markets real quick. We did have, kind of the Spanish market in with the French. It would have been interesting to see if they could have depressed, the prestige of the car outside Weiwu of Austria and had a mega market here, which would have been interesting to see, but they didn't go for that. But this is kind of the end of the game, or close-ish to it. I hope you guys enjoyed this little rundown, although it's probably a bit of a long rundown because we had to talk through 2 sessions worth of stuff. But if you enjoyed this, feel free to like, comment, subscribe, do the YouTube algorithm stuff, and go wee-woo and chat for the ambulance outside. Have a good one.